welcome back, and delighted to have back with us today. It's been quite some time. Dr. John Lott Jr. is with us. He's an economist, world-recognized expert on guns and crime, founder and the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, author of several books, Gun Control Myths. And during the Trump administration, Dr. Lott served as the senior advisor for research and statistics in the Office of the Justice Programs, and then the Office for Legal Policy in the U.S. Department of Justice. So what an honor to have him. He does have a website today, crimeresearch.org, crimeresearch.org. Dr. Lott, good to see you. How are you, friend?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Appreciate talking to you. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year to you. Good to see you back. Well, lots to talk to you about in a short amount of time. I'm just wondering today, have we become immune to crime?
Well, I don't think we've become immune to crime. I think we've kind of become, dense to kind of understanding what causes crime and how to stop it. I mean, it's not really rocket science. If you want to reduce crime, you want to make it risky and difficult for criminals to go and commit crime. Higher arrest rates, higher conviction rates, longer prison sentences. And you can also make it so that victims are able to defend themselves. All those things will make it riskier for criminals to commit crime and reduce it.
Can we trust the statistics we're hearing about crime today? That's a big question. I don't know. Can you narrow it down?
Right. Well, I guess it kind of depends on what statistics you're talking about. If you're just talking about the general crime statistics like murder rates and rape and robbery and things like that, they're a little bit less accurate than they were a few years ago, just because a large percentage of police departments in the country in the last year or so have stopped reporting that type of data. But there's other statistics which are very problematic. Things like data on hate crimes, I think, are very difficult to trust. Data that the FBI puts out on so-called active shooting cases. Those are instances where a gun's fired in public, not part of some other type of crime like a robbery or a gang fight over drug turf. Could be anything from one person being targeted and missed all the way up to mass public shooting. The FBI has gotten really notoriously bad in keeping track of those types of things, and in particular, missing out cases where people have used guns defensively to stop those types of attacks. The FBI claims that only about 4% of those types of attacks are stopped by citizens legally carrying guns. I think it's probably closer to 40%. And if you distinguish places between gun-free zones where law-abiding citizens aren't allowed to carry versus ones where they are, you can't expect law-abiding citizens to stop attacks in places where it's illegal for them to carry. And yet, if you separate those out, about 60% of the attacks in places where they're allowed to carry are stopped by law-abiding citizens.
Is there a legitimate connection between the rise of illegal immigration and the crime rate in America?
Well, I think there's a strong relationship there. I think it's not just in the United States. I think Europe has seen the same type of phenomenon. You have different types of immigrants. Legal immigrants, people who go through the process, I think the evidence indicates they tend to be very law-abiding compared to the average American. But those who come illegally tend to be much more likely to engage in crime than the typical American. So the more illegals that you let in, I think that's definitely correlated with higher crime rates.
I wish I had for more time, but I want to take advantage of what I do have you here. What do you think about the concern that people have for election integrity, not only 2020, but are we facing the same kind of concerns going into this current year?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think there are real problems that exist there. Look, even the Carter-Baker Commission and others have recognized that there are problems with absentee ballots. You can have vote buying, you can have other types of corruption type issues that are there. I don't think people kind of understand kind of the history of voting in the United States. most states didn't have the secret ballot up until relatively recently. And the reason why we adopted secret ballots was to try to stop vote buying. And it's the reason why we made it very difficult to have absentee ballots. Unfortunately, now we're at a stage where many states actually are keeping mail-in ballots. The problem that you have there is that with a secret ballot, you can't pay somebody for voting because you don't know how they voted inside the voting booth. They can tell you how they voted, but you can't be sure. But when you have mail-in ballots in particular, or absentee ballots, the person can show you how they voted. And nowadays, we even have ballot harvesting, which has been legalized in some states, where you can give the person who's paying you the money the ballot, so that not only can they check to see how you voted, but they can turn it in themselves in order to make sure that it gets cast. And so, people can get paid for that type of activity.
If someone is caught, is this prosecutable?
Well, if they're caught, but it's difficult because you have both parties involved want to hide it. The person who's getting paid doesn't want anybody to know that he got paid, and the person who's paying him doesn't want people to know. The thing is, it's just not the United States. You look at Europe, for example.
Right.
The 47 countries in Europe, 35 of the countries ban absentee ballots for people living in the country. Another 10 allow it, but only for people who go and show a valid government-issued ID to pick it up. They won't send it to you in the mail. And 6 of those 10 countries limited even further to people who are in the military or in the hospital at the time. And even then, you have to have third-party verification. It just won't take your word for it. So the rest of the world has much stricter rules in order to prevent vote fraud, vote buying, than we have here in the United States.
It's alarming. I want to come back to guns and gun control. There's always an attempt to limit the Second Amendment. In some places, they're succeeding. What's your 30,000-foot view of happening to the Second Amendment?
Well, I think there's a real battle going on right now. The Biden administration is putting literally thousands of gun dealers out of business over what they call their zero tolerance policy, where if you make one paperwork mistake, no matter how trivial, no matter how inconsequential, it could be a typo 15, 16, 17 years ago, they will put you out of business. Could you imagine if we had that rule for government agencies? If a government agency makes one typo in any form over the last 15 or 16 years, we'll put the government agency out of business. How many government agencies do you think would be in existence? But, Biden wants to go and call those rogue gun dealers who are selling guns out of the back of their store to criminals, and that's just ridiculous. I mean, if he has evidence of that, fine, put those out of business. But that's not what we're talking about. I mean, I just saw a case a couple weeks ago where a gun dealer in northern Texas had made mistakes, tiny, transposing a couple letters 15 and 16 years ago. The Obama administration had looked at it and had said that these were trivial mistakes, had fined them, and had closed the books on it. He's made no other paperwork mistakes over the intervening 15 years. But the Biden administration went back, reopened those 2 cases from 15 and 16 years ago, and have used them to take away the individual's license to sell firearms. Those are the types of cases you're dealing with these days. And it's just not that. They're putting pressure on financial firms not to go and do business with companies that they don't approve of. Try running a business. If you can't have somebody handle your credit cards for your customers, your checks, or other things. Are there workarounds? Yeah, in many cases there are, but they're much more costly, and it's harder to stay in business in those cases.
In the meantime, it appears, Dr. Lott, that gun sales are through the roof, and especially with women. Is that true?
There's been a big increase. I mean, the hard data that we have is really on concealed carry permits. Over the last 10 years, the growth rate for women having permanent concealed handguns is about twice the rate for men. For blacks, it's actually about 3 times the rate for whites. Right now, you have about almost 30% of concealed carry permit holders are women in the country. And outside of New York and California, you have over 10% of the adult population with a concealed carry permit. And that's even count the fact you have 27 constitutional states where it's not even necessary to have a permit to carry.
So where do you see the next big threat coming to gun owners?
Well, I think the big issue is who controls the courts. I mean, you can just see what's been going on in California with their concealed carry rules that they have, which are essentially making it impossible for anybody to carry a permanent concealed handgun in the state. You had a Republican district court judge said, look, you know, you have to let people carry somehow. You just can't ban them being able to carry every place in the state. And he found he put a stay on the law going into effect on January 1st. And then you had the circuit court above it, which is dominated by Democrats, who put the law back in effect. So as of January 1st, you're effectively banned from carrying your permanent concealed handgun virtually any place in California. You know, by the end of this year, over 2/3 of the circuit and district court judges in the country will be Democratic appointees. By the end of the next administration, Clarence Thomas will be 80 and Sam Alito will be 78. You lose one or both of those justices, you're going to have a very different Supreme Court. And, you know, so this next election is going to make a huge difference in terms of how courts are going to interpret a broad range of First Amendment issues, from religious issues all the way up to Second Amendment issues.
Wow. Dr. Lott, thank you for your time. You're fascinating. I'd like to stay in connection with you and see how things go. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, crimeresearch.org is his website, crimeresearch.org. Thank you, Dr. Lott. God bless you, friends. Stay in the fight.
Thank you very much. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.